I've got the opportunity or the really privilege to hear you talk on AI quite a few times. And I both find myself really excited and really scared every single time. And it is an absolute joy. But you are right. It is time. We're going to have that little AI panel discussion. We're going to bring on Lee Kim, Rob Wood. We'll have David Hoelzer here with us. And really what we want to do is just kind of provide this outlet, this opportunity to just talk about AI. Lee has a lot of background. I would love for you to kind of just give a little brief intro just so everybody can kind of know who you are. Rob Wood, if you wouldn't mind either when you get a chance, just so everybody knows, we can kind of really just get this panel going.
Thanks. My name is Lee Kim. I am Senior Principal of Cybersecurity and Privacy at the Healthcare Information Management Systems Society. I'm also a registered U.S. patent attorney. And to that end, my focus areas are intellectual property as well as healthcare law. So I bring a combination of industry SME perspective, working for a nonprofit representing the healthcare sector, and also from the legal/IP/healthcare/cyber side. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and my name is Rob Wood. I'm the CISO at Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and former startup guy, former AppSec consultant.
No, absolutely phenomenal. No, and I guess really, since I don't see a question right now from the audience, I'm curious, Rob, really from your perspective, and Lee, you can kind of chime in next. Do you see kind of based off of what David's presentation was, or just maybe Rob in your own organization, this AI playing a pivotal part in healthcare as it moves forward?
Yeah, I think like any industry, these kind of disruptive technologies have a part to play. Where it actually comes in is going to be it's gonna, the devil's gonna be in the details. And for example, I have some good friends who are running a startup that is they're building a bunch of OCR image sort of detection models to assist with the medical coding process to work with hospitals. That's really interesting. I feel like image comparison is kind of the go-to use case. We're going to detect tumors or other issues in X-rays or sort of other sort of scans. And I think there's a lot of other opportunities in the healthcare ecosystem where these kind of disruptive technologies can really play a part, AI, machine learning being one of them. And so, I mean, I think yes, but I think it's probably what we're going to probably see is innovations happen. Yes, there will be pockets of it on the very obvious, almost quote obvious use cases, but hopefully much more so on all of the non-obvious things, like all the back-end processing. I mean, even think you walk into an ER or doctor's office, and there's always issues with scheduling and all of that. And how awesome is it that in the business world, we use tools like Clockwise and Calendly and stuff like that to in motion and optimize our scheduling. And I feel like there's opportunities to make patient experience better and all of that, and make things faster, make data processing and analytics easier and more effective. All those unexpected use cases, I feel like are where the real innovation is going to lie.
That's absolutely awesome. I think it's great. And Lee, a question for you: how exactly, since you do have that background of intellectual property and healthcare and kind of a little AI aspect of it, how does that play out legality? How do you start kind of intertwining all together? As you mentioned when David had his presentation earlier, he had the CAT scans or the MRI scans. He doesn't know how they got there. And how does that kind of work as that moves forward?
Sure. There's a bit to unpack there. And one is that in terms of innovation and AI and actually what people are securing patents on. Computer vision is certainly one of the focus areas that's kind of mid-tier in terms of the patent filings that USPTO is seeing in innovation. But to that end, things along the lines of production control processes, expert systems, that's at a higher tier in terms of filings and what people are filing on. And in fact, while we focus so much in terms of, let's say, computer-assisted radiology imaging interpretation and analysis, whereby these AI systems can literally see analytically what a radiologist with their naked eye can't see. I think that we're going to see a lot more in, just as Robert has suggested, in terms of the back end things, the process enhancing things to manage better patient volumes and triaging of them. If you look at, for example, Canada and other countries, sometimes during critical times such as pandemics, all of our countries have been overwhelmed in terms of patient volume and such. So I think that there's necessarily going to be a confluence in our healthcare sector in terms of a uniform understanding of AI. I mean, just as we speak today, ISO is having a standards meeting to talk about how do we normalize the definition of AI today. And from what I'm seeing across the healthcare sector, we have different understandings in terms of where AI and ML is heading. But just the same, what frightens me and where I think that training such as SANS can help people at large is that from the people perspective and the need for policies to govern safe and responsible use of AI, let's just say that healthcare is a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of adopting policies to that end, and that although we are seeing ready adoption of AI-based solutions, which is, of course, a good thing.
If I could add something to that too, Rich, I think that Lee mentioned something pretty important there in that it's the computer-assisted use of AI. So the assistant, the AI assistant. And that seems to be a really important thing. When I was speaking, I said something about not eliminating jobs. And it's not that no jobs go away, but we should not, at this time, certainly, be 100% reliant on any AI system to do anything for us, unless it's the most basic task, even more so in medical. So it's more that it becomes an assistant to speed up some things, like Robert was talking about with Calendly and other kinds of things we use in business. So it becomes a facilitator or something that can kind of drive our business, drive our speed. The real risk then is, it even goes back to part of what Heather was saying, but in a slightly different way. The human can become too reliant on it and just accept its recommendations without any critique. But if we view it as an assistive technology, that can be incredibly powerful.
I absolutely agree. And I think it's awesome. I think Lee really touched on a high level, those policies, kind of all that's protocols is kind of formulating how to properly use it. And I know we had a question in the chat, David, and really a group question is how do you defend somebody, tampering with the data? How do you stop somebody from putting the picture of the cat into the files? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're not going to like this answer in like an AI talk, but the answer is doing good traditional security stuff. So have you done the CIS critical controls? Because if you haven't done those, you have bigger problems than is my AI data set pure. But if you're doing those things, you're going to have a safe data set.
No, that makes perfect sense.
I don't know that I agree with it entirely, given that on the whole, yes, you want to make sure that you're protecting your data set from tampering or integrity issues and such. But thinking about the threat model of some sort of AI application where you might be sourcing data from other places, and so you might have to have more edge protection stuff at the point of image collection, whether it's some kind of webhook, if it's you're accepting something over the web, or it's something more of a closed loop system. But your threat model is going to be different than bread and butter databases and web CRUD applications. And so you may end up having to like put more controls in at the edge. You may end up having to like build protections into your model to like screen before you store and then further train, or something along those lines. But like I think there's a little bit more nuance to it that is important to call out.
Oh yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I'm not trying to minimize that. Yeah, sorry, Lee.
Oh, that's okay. And I also wanted to add, from a realistic perspective, there are some healthcare organizations, I'm not saying do this, but there are some healthcare organizations that don't have any kind of insider threat program in place at all. And they just inherently trust people. And I'd say, look, folks, I think we all know NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 is coming out. And the first core function is govern. It's a huge new component. And boy, I can't think of any sector that doesn't have problems in terms of governance, right? And to that end, I also have to say, so that's one problem. We trust people too darn much in healthcare. So people are the solution in terms of people management and detecting and mitigating against that. But I think that the other thing too is who's reviewing training data, right? You have healthcare providers that are being approached all the time by vendors are saying, we want your images. We just don't have that. We need tens of thousands of images to train our model and everything else. And I think it's also very important to ensure that, number one, the vendors don't get exactly what they want, that we rigorously de-identify things. But I think that it's also very important for these people that are making models to ensure that we don't have drift in terms of the model, that it doesn't work, to Dave's point, in a way that it wasn't originally intended to do. I mean, that sets the, arguably, not legal advice, the manufacturer up in terms of perhaps product liability claims if something works unintended and let's say it's viewed as a manufacturing defect.
I have to say personally, I think it's awesome because, on a panel of three here, you really get a really perfect idea of, defensive in depth. You really had Dave looking at the end user itself, kind of looking at the imaging. You had Rob kind of looking at branching out from there, looking at the endpoints and go a little bit further. And then Lee coming, the government portion of it and really just replying. As we state on almost every cybersecurity domain we have and every type of part of it is really just, defense in depth is probably the best answer.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say, like Lee, I definitely agree with your comment about the like insider threat and this sector being a little too trusting of people. I think one big challenge there though is like building an insider threat capability is really hard, and it's really expensive. And for a sector that's already like, we don't print cash like financial services does or tech does. And so like for a sector that's already cash strapped, and like you've got rural hospitals, for example, that like operate in the red, and like margins are thin and all that, all that jazz. It's like, there's all this stuff to do. It's like, so where do you garner the money for a proper insider threat program that is not just going to be, some junky UBA tool that you like drop on your network and expect to solve your problems, but rather like, a team that like has a tool, has data, builds process, has like legal sort of like, grounding to like take action on people, and like monitor them and all that, which, has HR implications, but then also like invest the time to like understand the context of like what's safe, what's not safe and all that. It's like, I think that, honestly, I hate to make it a budget problem, but I think that's one of those things that's like, I mean, at least this is my personal opinion. I look at insider threat as like a more advanced, like if you're flush and you're doing good on all the other stuff, then you can start thinking about insider threat. But like, security teams that are like not quite there yet in terms of like their other basic stuff, like should not probably be thinking about insider threat.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that economics, to paraphrase cybersecurity for business and what Larry Clinton has said about building a robust cybersecurity program within business organizations, you absolutely have to keep the relative economics in mind, and that you can only have a program to the extent that your budget will allow. But that said, that doesn't obviate the fact that in terms of insider threat, you can have some kind of program for see something, say something, for simple things such as supervision of that training data or development aspect. You do what you can. I don't think that it can be ignored. I mean, trust me, I understand that it can be certainly sophisticated. I've worked with a few of my colleagues at the CERT Coordination Center that are insider threat researchers, and of course, it could be very sophisticated, both in terms of how it's performed and what kind of detection and mitigation measures you need. But essentially, I still think you still have to do what you can. Blind willfulness will not help anyone, including lawyers and non-lawyers.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, don't stick your head in the sand. But it's like, I feel like the typical security answer is like, as a community, we rally so hard around like, when we do something, we're not just going to like do it a little bit. We're going to try to like, we're going to try to kill it and, do it really well. And I know so many people that end up taking on way too much. And then they're just like, they're burnt out or they're strapped or their prioritization focus is split into like 4,000 different, places. And it's like, and then your overall effectiveness just like nosedives. And so I think it's like, it's a tricky line to walk, to know that you have risk and to do a little bit about it, but kind of like accept that risk until you have the funding or resources to properly deal with it.
No, I think that's absolutely, again, great conversations are always awesome to have. I am curious, and this is for everybody, just my own thing. I know a few years back, blockchain was super big, and it was supply chains were super big, and the ChatGPT made AI and ML super big. Do you all believe that has the staying power compared to the other ones? I mean, they're all kind of important, but do you see AI or ML really expanding and growing beyond what we see now? Like, I know Dave brought earlier in his presentation, will a computer ever think like a human or be a human? That's kind of irrelevant. And at this point, I'm just curious, is there a limit to AI or ML, kind of what we see now?
So if I could take that first, there's clearly a limit on what it can do today. And one of the questions people are really interested in, and where a lot of research is happening, is in artificial general intelligence. And now this is just my opinion, but we are a very long way away from that, if ever. It's the size of the model required based on how we approach AI today is just, it's orders of magnitude larger than the largest thing we have. So putting that aside, right now, I believe we're at a very critical point. Does AI and ML have a really important part to play in what we do in healthcare and really many other places like cybersecurity? Absolutely. But we're at a critical point right now because we're starting to be at the point where executives are asking, all right, I've been told I need AI, but what does it actually do for me? So this kind of goes toward what Robert was saying, right? In my company, you want to do a thing, you bring a problem to me, you have a solution. Unless you can tell me how I'm going to measure that problem, measure your solution, we're not going to do that. We're not spending money on it. So you need AI. Great. What problem are you solving? And how well will it solve it? So we're at a point where we're becoming more critical about how it's used. That's important. And if we don't have good answers and products there, this is just going to fall by the wayside. The other big risk is if we continue to see people over-promising what their tools can do in terms of AI and ML. Every vendor today is telling you they are AI and ML. But when you scratch at that, quite frequently, they are only AI and ML in the loosest possible definition. So if we do not really deliver on those things, we're going to go through another AI winter, which we've been through many times over many decades, where all of the funding drives up because we've overpromised again.
Absolutely phenomenal. Rob, Lee, did you have anything you want to weigh in on before we move on?
I wouldn't count artificial intelligence out as in that we wouldn't reach that within the next 20 to 50 years, in the sense that in the 1990s, when I was a student in college, the biologists were saying we could never, ever map out the human genome. But here we are. To that end, I really feel that AI, ML, and even us reaching a singularity is certainly something that is to be concerned about. I think that there certainly is incentive for companies to take it as far as they can. But then too, I really feel that from a physician perspective, from a clinician or people perspective in terms of healthcare, we've run healthcare based upon people. It's people caring for people. And do we necessarily want, for example, the clinical decision support system to be totally AI-based without supervision from a nurse practitioner or physician? Although I could say that to some extent, technology is already used somewhat as a crutch, in that physicians and others don't necessarily need to have in their heads drug allergy interactions. It's or what to prescribe. It's in that clinical decision support system, and so on and so forth. But I still have to say, in as much as it's human nature to want to cede certain responsibilities, I do think, to Dave's and Robert's point, we do need to take a step back and consider what we're doing. And in terms of the overarching risk and what we're willing to accept, are we willing to accept potentially jeopardizing human life? So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like any technology, we're going to see sort of a trajectory of adoption and innovation surrounding it, and then eventually something else will come along and probably be newer and cooler and more effective and blow it all away. Like, I mean, you kind of saw this with like phones and workstation, desktops to laptops to tablets to data centers to cloud to containers, now to serverless. Like, there's this constant like birth and death thing that happens with technology and this kind of life cycle of sorts. And I don't know why this would be any different. And so I fully anticipate it's going to grow and be more relevant, but like, who's to say what the next like amazing breakthrough is going to be?
No, absolutely. Listen, David, Robert, Lee, I greatly appreciate you taking the time out. This is, for me, I know it was great. I hope everybody listening actually walked away with something great as well.